Today is Thursday, April the 16th, 2009, and I want to make a further comment on the Knight case. Ira Wells wrote an article in the National Post yesterday, A13, in which he said that it wasn't self-defense by Mr. Knight. Now, as you know, Mr. Knight, finding thieves on his property, pursued one of them who had stolen his all-terrain vehicle and eventually drove him off the road when he attempted to escape. And I suppose Ira Wells is right to say it's not self-defense of your home and property. But what Mr. Wells doesn't seem to understand, and what many people don't realize, is that every citizen has the right, just like a policeman does, to arrest someone who they find in the act of committing a crime. Now, that means that Mr. Knight would have every bit as much right to arrest someone, and if they attempted to flee the arrest, to pursue them. Having done so, he could use such force as was reasonably necessary to apprehend them in the act of committing the crime. The crime was the original theft. They're driving his motor vehicle away, so they're actually perpetuating the theft, continuing the theft. He drives them off the road. They're in the act of committing a crime. He tries to arrest them further. They aren't willing to stop, and he actually apparently shot them. The circumstances in which the shot was fired are important. But what if a policeman had done that? Would anyone criticize a policeman for shooting a suspect who refused to stop and had taken a vehicle, was in the very act of stealing the vehicle? No, most people would realize that the policeman has the right to use force, even lethal force, to stop an ongoing offense, be it theft or any other kind of offense. Policemen have firearms for that purpose. So what I'm saying is a citizen has as much right to use force, and even lethal force, in the face of an ongoing criminal act, as a policeman would have. Now, once the person is apprehended, they have a duty to turn them over to the law enforcement officials. But they have a duty to enforce the law. Every citizen has a duty to enforce the law, and to use such force as is necessary to prevent the commission of criminal offenses. So, Mr. Knight, although he wasn't in the act of defending property when he endeavored to apprehend and to stop this criminal in the course of his crime, was entitled, and was probably, arguably, in a position of exercising a citizen's right of arrest, and a right to continue that apprehension and to continue to detain that person in custody until he could turn them over to lawful authority. And he had called 911. So it's not necessary to be in the act of self-defense to use force. You could, in the act of committing a citizen's arrest, in the act of preventing a crime, you could, and probably, arguably he did, arguably he was in the act of arresting and detaining a criminal who was in the course of committing a crime. So what we have to realize is the police do not have a monopoly on authority. They do not have a monopoly on the law. They do not have a monopoly on the use of force. Citizens have a right to use force to protect their property, to protect their lives, and indeed to enforce the law themselves. They have a right of arrest. And as long as we have that, the police are not the only recourse for law enforcement. And if all the things that were done by Mr. Knight were done by a policeman in the very same process, no one would be criticizing that policeman for using the force that was used. And in those circumstances, I think it's appropriate for people to realize we have some power. And most people don't have the courage to exercise that power, but I think Mr. Knight should be commended for trying to uphold the law, and trying to do the right thing, and trying to exercise a citizen's right to maintain the law and to maintain the authority of the law in the face of a theft. And if Western Canadians do not realize that Canada is eliminating those citizens' rights, and if they do not take steps to preserve them, poor people like Mr. Knight will be the criminals who will be punished for the negligence of all of us in preserving the rights of a citizen. And that's why we need to have the power to legislate for ourselves in Western Canada so that the power of the citizen is maintained, and the state will be secure when the citizen is free to maintain the law themselves and to maintain the order and peace of society by the proper use of their own authority. We should not delegate all our power to the state. And Western Canadians need to know that in Canada they're losing their rights, their freedoms, and their power, and that's another good reason why we need to free the West.